All right, welcome back. We are going to start the first real lesson in this tutorial on how to make a text-based video game, an RPG from your phone. So what we want to do right now is just make a new file, because the file we have has a whole bunch of stuff in there, and you might want to keep that. So I'd like to make something new, and I'm going to create a new file with that plus in the upper left corner. I'm just going to call it Sandbox. This is going to be our place to play around with new concepts. So this won't be part of the game, although we may find ourselves copying and pasting and whatever else with this. But today is all about input and output, and you don't need to know this yet, but it's such an easy thing. If you put that little, it's actually called an octothorpe in this day and age. Most people call it a hashtag. It's got a bunch of different names too. £. I'm sure there's others still. This is what means a note line. So we're going to say input / output. And that way we just know this is what we're talking about today. So in that first video, when we made a whole game, part of what we did was print statements. And when we print things, sometimes it's very simple, just like a singular line of code, or not code, I should say, just a singular statement. So it's always print and then quotes. And then while there are a few characters that cause issues, generally speaking, you can type whatever you want to inside the parentheses and the quotes, and it's just going to display on the screen. So for now, let's talk a little bit about the bad guy of our game. And I decided that Dark Cyborg is going to be our enemy. So Dark Cyborg. Oops, helps if you spell things right. Cyborg, there we go. Dark Cyborg rules the land with an evil iron fist. And if I run this very short and simple code, you can see down there between the Python 3 IDE is running in the end, you can see Dark Cyborg rules the land with an evil iron fist. Okay. You can do those all day long. You could have pages, but you could do a whole story just printing stuff out. Now, that's not a fun and interactive game, but it would work. What we want to do now, though, is we want to look at, would help if I did the right thing. Let's open the sandbox back up. Here we go. What we want to do is maybe add some other things. So, like, how about we are going to say, what type of character would you like to play? Nah, because we don't want to do character types. So how about just what is your name? And in order to do that, we need to take some sort of input. Now, in order to store our input, we need to put it in what's known as a variable. And I'll go into much greater detail in future lessons on how variables work. But generally speaking, a variable is just like a box that you put something in. In this case, it's going to be a name, but it can be a number. It can be any number of things. So we're just going to say name, and let's just call it name. And so it's going to be equal to, and then when you do an input statement, input, you need the parentheses no matter what. And if you put quotes, it basically works like a print statement, except it's also waiting for user input. So we're going to say, what is your name? And now something else to keep in mind is that when you do the input statement just as it is, the variable that it gets stored into is always going to be a string, which is words and characters and things of that nature. When we start putting in numbers, we have to do things a little bit differently. So anyway, right now it's just going to say, what is your name? It's going to wait for you to do that. And then just to show how this works, I'm going to do print hi. And then we're going to do print. And if I don't use quotes and I just use a variable, it will output that variable. So I'm including this now so that we can actually see. Why is it telling me name error? Oh, never mind. We'll be able to actually see that the input that we put in actually worked. So let's run this one now. And it says, there we go, Dark Cyborg rose to land. What is your name? Dave. Not really my name, but that's okay. And then it says hi, and then the line below that, Dave. So after it takes our input, it runs the next couple of lines of code, and we saw the print statement in a few other ways. So honestly, that is the very basis of how input and output works. I am going to go into a little bit more detail here. Namely, let's do a few more things. So how about age is going to be another input. What is your age? And then we're going to do print you are, print age. And now, for those of you who might know a little bit more, you're going to say, there's something off here. It's not going to appear off yet, but you'll see it soon. Anyway, now my name's going to be Sue. Hi, Sue, what is your age? 24. You are 24. So it appears to work just fine. However, I'm going to add 2 more lines of code now. Oops. Need a bigger keyboard. Print next year you will be one parentheses too many. Okay. Next year you will be, and then you can do simple math, something else we'll talk about later. Age plus 1. Oops, I got a plus right there. Age plus 1 will take whatever the value of age is and add 1 to it. However, you're going to see one thing wrong with this when I actually try to run it. It might even just give me an error. Okay, what is your name? Just the letter G. What is your age? 23. And now we got an error. And when you're just learning, looking at all these crazy errors, concatenate, str, not int, blah, 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 a lot of that stuff might not make a whole ton of sense. Hopefully in time it will make sense to you. But what the problem is, when I said whenever you do an input, it inputs as a string. String is just characters. If you want numbers that you can actually work with as if they were real numbers, we need to make them integers. So here where it says age equals input, what is your age? I'm just going to put something else around that, and it's int. Oops. And when I put int around it, now it's going to make that value be an integer, which means that I can work with it. So, what is your name? Yuri. What is your age? 53. Next year you will be 54. So by putting the int in front of the input, we can now do an integer type. Will apply to whatever the user actually types in. There's a lot more to this. There's always going to be a lot more to everything. But I just wanted to get us a nice solid idea of what input and output is going to look like. This is useful for when we are creating a character. Probably not going to worry too much about the age of our character, but I think name makes sense. And also just printing out things like what we started with, the story of the game, being that this is going to be a really old school text-based game. There's going to be a lot of print statements because, that's how the player is going to interact with the world that we create. All right, well, hopefully you enjoyed this and learned a bit from it. There will be more in the not too distant future. Please subscribe, like, share, anything you can, and we will see you next time.